Sergeant James Doakes spent most of Season 2 doing what an entire task force couldn't. No tip, no big break, just a cop who trusted his gut and refused to let it go. He followed Dexter to a marina. We watched him take out a boat at 3 in the morning. He sat outside his apartment. He told his lieutenant directly, something is wrong with that man. Miami Metro thought Doakes was obsessed. Lundy thought it was personal. Debra thought it was jealousy. But Doakes was right. The Bay Harbor Butcher Task Force had FBI resources, forensic labs, and full control over the entire case, and they were going in circles. Doakes had a bad feeling and was following Dexter around, and he was closer to catching him than anyone else across 8 seasons. The only reason it didn't end in Season 2 is that a propane tank exploded in the Everglades and took him with it, a death Dexter didn't even plan. Lila West burned that cabin down on her own. Dexter Morgan survived because Doakes died by accident. So the question isn't complicated. It's actually the most direct question the show ever avoided asking. What happens if Doakes walks out of that cabin? By the time Doakes ended up locked in that cabin, he had already gathered enough to force serious attention on Dexter Morgan. And the cabin was not where the evidence started. It was where it was confirmed. Doakes didn't stumble onto Dexter randomly. The order of what he found and when matters because it shows how much ground he had already covered before anyone else in the department took him seriously. It started with watching Dexter's behavior. Doakes noticed something was off about how Dexter acted at crime scene. Not nervous, not distant in the way that someone gets after years on the job, but genuinely relaxed in a way that Doakes couldn't explain and couldn't let go of. He brought this to Lieutenant LaGuerta directly. She told him to back off. He didn't. He followed Dexter to the marina over and over. He watched him take out the slice of life at hours that made no sense for his job. A blood expert has no reason to be running a boat out of Miami Marina at 3 a.m. Doakes reported what he saw to LaGuerta and others in the department. Nobody did anything about it. Then the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation opened. Lundy's team started pulling bodies out of the bay, cut up, bagged, disposed of in a way that suggested someone with detailed knowledge of the human body and access to a boat big enough to go out into open water. Doakes looked at that picture and looked at Dexter Morgan and kept pushing. When Dexter found out Doakes was watching him, he planted cocaine in Doakes' car to get him removed from duty. That matters because it worked. The department pulled Doakes off the street and gave Dexter room to breathe. But it also means Doakes was close enough that Dexter had to actively take him down rather than simply staying careful. That's not a man who was on the wrong track. Then Doakes found the blood slide collection hidden in Dexter's apartment. He took the slides. He traveled to Haiti to find a lab that could test them without drawing attention inside Miami Metro, which shows exactly how serious he was taking this, and how carefully he was trying to keep it away from the department he didn't trust. He came back with the results. He knew what he had. The cabin came after all of that. By the time Doakes ended up locked in that place in the Everglades, he had already found the trophy slides that matched the Bay Harbor Butcher's pattern, had them tested, and had heard Dexter admit to it directly in that cabin. The location didn't give him the evidence, it gave him the final confirmation. Doakes had evidence pointing strongly towards Dexter, along with hearing it straight from Dexter in the cabin. The explosion didn't stop a cop chasing a feeling, it stopped a cop who had already done their work. The slides and confession are one thing. What happens when Doakes walks back into Miami Metro with both is a different problem entirely, because the department he's walking into was already working against him in ways that had nothing to do with Dexter. That's where this gets complicated. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now because the next section is where Doakes either wins or gets buried by his own department. Doakes coming back with evidence doesn't automatically finish Dexter, because the way Miami Metro was set up at the moment would create serious pushback, even without Dexter doing anything. This is part of the situation that gets skipped. People assume Doakes survives, shows the trophy slides, and it's over. But look at where the department actually stood with Doakes at that exact point in the season. Doakes had been suspended. His suspension came directly from a cocaine plant that the department took seriously enough to act on. His lieutenant, Maria LaGuerta, had already told him multiple times to drop it. LaGuerta's resistance at this point came from years of trust and familiarity with Dexter, not any knowledge of what he actually was. She had genuinely believed that Doakes had let a personal issue with a colleague get out of hand, and that was now the official story. The FBI's lead investigator, Frank Lundy, had never seriously looked at Dexter as a suspect despite working in the same building. The whole direction of the BHB investigation going into the end of Season 2 was pointing towards Doakes himself as the main suspect. So Doakes walks back in with trophy slides he found in a colleague's apartment, slides he took without any legal permission while he was suspended for something connected to that same colleague after the department had already officially dealt with a complaint about him. Lawyers would likely question the handling of evidence right away. Evidence gathered by a suspended officer acting with no official approval would face serious questions in court. No legal permission to enter the apartment, no official authority for anything Doakes did after the complaint was processed. Evidence connected to a well-documented bad relationship between Doakes and Dexter. Any decent lawyer puts that story in front of a judge, and the slides become a real problem. Dexter would understand this faster than almost anyone. His whole working life was built around knowing exactly how physical evidence holds up or falls apart in court. The moment Doakes shows up with the slides, Dexter's response is in panic. It's to find every weak point in how they were gathered and let the system do the work. LaGuerta adds another layer. In Season 2, she has no reason to think Dexter is guilty of anything, and every reason to see Doakes as a problem that has now gotten worse. Her loyalty to Dexter at this point is built on years of working together. She would have not been looking for reasons to believe Doakes, she would have been looking for reasons to deal with him, and the evidence handling problem gives her exactly that. Lundy is the one factor that changes things. He was careful, trustworthy, and had no personal reason to protect Dexter. If Doakes goes to Lundy directly, skips LaGuerta, skips the department chain, and puts the slides and cabin story in front of the FBI lead, the legal problems with the evidence don't disappear, but the seriousness of what Doakes is saying shifts. Lundy would have to take it seriously. He wouldn't close a federal investigation by pointing at a dead man when a live cop is standing in front of him with physical evidence and a first-hand account of what happened in the Everglades. But Doakes and Lundy had no direct connection. Getting to Lundy meant going through a department that was already set up against Doakes at that exact moment. The trophy slides are real evidence of real crimes. They don't automatically become a clean case the moment Doakes walks out of the Everglades. The existing situation, the suspension, the cocaine complaint, LaGuerta's trust in Dexter, the investigation pointing at Doakes, means that things would likely move slowly even with Doakes alive. Dexter's best short-term protection isn't his cover story, it's the institution. And that's what stops it from ending immediately. But departments don't hold forever when a federal investigator is still working the building. What happens when Lundy gets a direct account from a witness instead of just a guess based on pattern? That changes what he can actually do, and that's the pressure point the show never had to explore. A surviving Doakes changes Lundy's position entirely, because a real witness with physical evidence is a completely different starting point than a general pattern with no direct lead. Lundy's picture of the Bay Harbor Butcher was already accurate enough to make Dexter nervous throughout Season 2. He worked out that the BHB had detailed knowledge of the human body, access to a boat, careful habits suggesting some kind of professional background, and a pattern that wasn't random. Criminals, specifically, dealt with in a consistent way that suggested routine rather than panic. That picture pointed towards someone with knowledge of how police work and access to crime scenes. Dexter fitted, and so did, in theory, a number of people in that building. The problem for Lundy was that he was working from educated guesses. He had the picture, but no witnesses, no one who had direct contact with the killer, and no direct link between the picture and a specific person. Doakes gives him a witness account and physical evidence in the same conversation. A suspended cop making claims is one thing. A suspended cop who can place himself at the scene of a direct admission who had previously found trophy slides matching the BHB's pattern in the suspect's apartment, who traveled to Haiti to have them tested away from Miami Metro, that is a witness with a documented trail of his own investigation. Lundy's job changes. He no longer is building a general picture against a building full of people. He has a name and a specific set of facts that need to be looked at. A solid witness combined with physical trophy evidence could give Lundy enough to go after legal permissions to search. That search process is where Dexter's real exposure potentially begins. Not because the slide alone closed the case, but because what they justify looking at next could. The slice of life is the obvious place to start. Dexter used that boat throughout the series. A proper search of that vessel, carried out with legal permission, by a team with no connection to Miami Metro, could turn up things that are hard to explain. A blood expert's personal boat, with signs of regular offshore trips, biological material, and tools matching the BHB's method, would not look innocent in the middle of a federal investigation into bodies disposed of at sea. Investigators could look at Dexter's work history to see whether his involvement in cases lined up in strange ways with the victims, whether his name showed up on files in ways that did match his actual job. Not enough on its own, but meaningful as part of a bigger picture. Investigators might also look at what Dexter was buying for tools or supplies connected to the killings, another angle that becomes worth pursuing once the investigation had a named person and legal permission to look. Dexter's options in this situation are genuinely limited. He can't kill Doakes once Doakes has spoken to Lundy. That makes everything worse, and it goes against the code anyway. He can't damage Doakes' reputation when Doakes is presenting physical evidence to a federal investigator. He might try to interfere with the slides somehow, but that requires getting to federal evidence he no longer has access to once it's in Lundy's hands. The one real option Dexter has is to run before any searches begin. Whether he gets enough warning to do that is a genuine question, because Lundy, once he has Doakes' account, has good reason to move fast. Lundy working alone against a general picture gets slowed by Dexter's professional cover and the department's resistance. Lundy working with a live Doakes who has a first-hand account, a documented trail of his own investigation, and physical evidence pointing at a specific named person is in a completely different position. The search process that follows is where Dexter's actual legal danger potentially begins, and he has no clean move that makes things better. That's what changes on the law enforcement side. But Doakes surviving doesn't just change the investigation, it changes the mental conditions Dexter is working under in a way that the show had never had to explore, because the cabin explosion gave him a fresh start. Without that fresh start, the pressure doesn't build and then go away, it just keeps building, and that's where the show's own evidence becomes relevant. Now leave a comment which piece of evidence you think creates the most pressure for Dexter, because the answer might not be what you expect. Dexter's ability to stay in control throughout the series depended on pressure being short-term and solvable. A live Doakes combined with an active federal investigation is pressure that never goes away, and the show suggests Dexter becomes more careless when that kind of long-term pressure builds. This is the angle that doesn't get enough attention in this situation. Dexter's mental system, the dark passenger, the code, Harry's rules, worked like a pressure release valve. Kill carefully, kill the right people, keep the cover, repeat. The code worked when problems were short-term and could be solved by removing the source. Doakes becomes a problem, so Dexter plants cocaine and removes him. The pressure drops, he carries on. The cabin is the only time in the series where Dexter held onto a problem for a long period without solving it, and look at what that did to him. He kept Doakes alive in that cage for weeks, not because keeping him alive was the smart move, but because Dexter was genuinely torn. Doakes was innocent. He was a cop doing exactly what a cop should do. Killing him went against the code, and Dexter knew it, and he couldn't bring himself to do it, and that unresolved tension was clearly wearing on him across those episodes. Lila solved it for him, and he never had to make the choice. Now, put Doakes alive and talking to Lundy with a federal investigation building around Dexter's name. The pressure doesn't build and then drop, it grows every single day. Every day Doakes is alive and the investigation is active is another day Dexter is exposed with no clean option the code allows. Doakes is innocent, Lundy is innocent. His sister is now connected to the investigation because of her relationship with Lundy during that same season. Every person in Dexter's life who matters is becoming part of a closing circle, and there is no single move that opens it back up. The show gives a direct example of what this kind of long-term pressure produces. In Season 7, when LaGuerta was closing in, the show suggests Dexter becoming more careless as the pressure grows. He made mistakes he likely wouldn't have made under normal conditions. He walked into the Hector Estrada situation, which was the exact trap LaGuerta had set for him, because his judgment was affected by the ongoing pressure of someone who wouldn't stop. That one person, one season, was LaGuerta still mostly working alone. Doakes plus Lundy plus an active federal investigation is a completely different level of pressure across a faster timeline with less room to move and no clear end in sight. There's also the Debra problem, which sits underneath all of this. In Season 2, Debra's relationship with Lundy was real and serious. She was also, at that point, completely unaware of what Dexter was. A live Doakes situation means Debra is in a relationship with the lead investigator on a case that is now targeting her brother, and she doesn't know it. When that comes out, and it would come out, the emotional damage inside Dexter's closest relationships hits exactly at the moment his ability to hold things together is already under maximum strain. Dexter's ability to keep it all going is not without limits. The consistent picture the show gives across every season where the pressure became long-term rather than short-term is a version of Dexter who gets slower, less precise, and more reactive. The code that was meant to protect him becomes a wall that limits his options at the worst possible time. The show suggests that Dexter becomes more careless when pressure builds over time, rather than going away. A live Doakes with a federal investigator behind him doesn't give Dexter a fresh start. The code blocks the moves that would stop the pressure. His closest relationship is caught in the middle. The breakdown that took most of Season 7 to produce would arrive much faster under these conditions. Dexter Morgan survived Season 2 because a propane tank exploded, not because his cover was airtight. not because the evidence was thin, not because Miami Metro was close to clearing him. Lila West burned a cabin in the Everglades and handed Dexter Morgan the rest of his life. At that moment, Doakes had the marina watching. The trophy slides from Dexter's apartment with independent test results from Haiti, and a direct emission from Dexter in that cabin. Lundy was still working the case with federal resources and no personal loyalty to anyone at Miami Metro. With Doakes alive, Lundy gets a witness, a physical evidence trail, and a named person, more than anyone else has put together across 8 seasons. The department's resistance slowed things down, LaGuerta's trust in Dexter, the investigation pointing at Doakes as the main suspect. That doesn't vanish overnight, but Lundy doesn't owe LaGuerta anything, and he doesn't have years of working relationship with Dexter Morgan. A general picture, a witness, and a basis to search is more than enough to keep the investigation moving forward, regardless of what the department wants. Mentally, Dexter has no fresh start, no explosion that closes the chapter, just a federal investigation that moves forward every day, and a code that blocks the moves that would actually stop it. Doakes was right about Dexter from the moment he watched him at a crime scene and felt something was wrong. The show's solution was to remove him through a coincidence, so convenient it reads like the writers protecting their main character from the one cop who's actually going to catch him. With Doakes alive, season 3 as the show gave it to us almost certainly doesn't happen. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next in-depth analysis.